Good afternoon and welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical. I hope the week has gone well. Let me start with some pretty dramatic moves. Yesterday, the US 2-year Treasury sank to 1.38%, the lowest level in 2 years, as the market capitulated and priced in a further rate cut. I take you back to something Sun Charters wrote, and he's a great loss, I must say, because he's gone off Twitter, but he wrote on Monday, April Fool's Day 2019. The premise of ZIRP and NIRP was always these are temporary measures for atrial fibrillation of the economy. 10 years later, same medicine in ever larger dosage to keep the patient alive, the definition of a vegetative state, and I couldn't agree with him more on that very point. So the implied probability of a Federal Reserve rate cut this month has increased to 87% after 2 weak ISM numbers. That's from J.S. Blockland. Came across a fantastic essay in Bloomberg. Chaos scientist finds hidden financial risks that regulators miss. Oxford professor Doyne farmer, quite a character going from the photograph. Oxford University professor Doyne farmer traces his research exposing risks in the financial system to the roulette wheels of Las Vegas. In the 1970s, Farmer and two fellow physics students at the University of California at Santa Cruz built a computer small enough to hide in a shoe that helped them predict roughly where roulette balls would land. At casinos in Vegas, they communicated with toe-control switches and transmitters, also in their shoes, about what bets to make. The gadget was legal, but they feared their winnings, about a 20% return on their wagers, would lead to trouble, so they quit after a couple of years. We were nervous about getting our kneecaps broken. Today, in a more bucolic setting, the Institute for New Economic Thinking at the Oxford Martin School, Farmer is drawing on decades of complexity research that began with roulette. After winning acclaim as a pioneer of chaos theory, which helps explain the unpredictability of complex systems such as the weather, he jumped into the markets, co-founding one of the early quantitative investment firms in the 1990s. Agent-based models used in fields from biology to sociology are bottom-up, simulating the messy interactions of hundreds and even millions of agents, human cells, or attitudes, or financial firms to explain the behavior of a complex system. The non-linear interplay can produce unexpected phenomena such as economic busts and booms, providing insights into the causes of events and the best responses. Epidemiologists have successfully deployed the models for years to test strategies to control everything from obesity to the spread of infectious diseases, including the flu. Today, central banks mostly stress test financial firms individually, but agent-based models are giving regulators a better read by accounting for the system-wide impact of shocks. In the simulations, a shock to a single firm cascades through the network of banks and asset managers, creating feedback loops that significantly amplify the initial losses. It's the kind of contagion that a decade ago spread from the US subprime mortgage market through lenders, money managers, and insurers, creating a liquidity crisis that doomed Lehman Brothers and infected the global economy. The banks are highly interconnected and highly leveraged. We now know from Lehman that if something happens to one bank, it can be devastating to the entire economy. Reveals that financial losses from shocks could be 3 times greater compared with a traditional stress test, and that current capital buffers may be too small. He leapt into uncharted territory in the 1970s when he was a physics graduate student specializing in cosmology at UC Santa Cruz. He switched his focus to chaos in complex systems, a subject so new that there were no professors who could teach it. The scientists showed that the volatility is generated from within, caused by chaos, in which a small disturbance in the initial conditions of a complex system is amplified exponentially. That's why the weather is so hard to predict, the butterfly effect, as it were. In 1981, Farmer went to the Center for Nonlinear Studies at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where freewheeling research was the norm. In 1991, Farmer started Prediction Co. in Santa Fe, New Mexico, with 2 physicist friends, Norman Packard and James McGill. After about 5 years, Prediction's automated statistical arbitrage strategy was earning risk-adjusted returns about 5 times the S&P 500's. He says he had several conversations with legendary hedge fund investor George Soros. When Soros's Institute for New Economic Thinking formed a partnership with Oxford in 2012, the university hired Farmer to run its complexity economics program. Complexity economists, while few in number, have a shared ambition to knock holes in a cornerstone of DSGE models, rational expectations, the idea that everyone in the economy understands each other's decisions and are mutually compatible in their pursuit of their self-interest. People don't obey rules as reliably as atoms do. In his stress test model of the European financial system, for instance, he had to make assumptions about what assets bankers might dump after their firms suffered shocks. They will likely sell the most liquid assets because they will lose less money. Agent-based models also suffer from the black box problem. The inner workings are so complex, with thousands of agents running in different directions, that it can be difficult to pinpoint the main drivers of a model's finding. This is a photograph of the gentleman by Carlotta Cardano of Bloomberg Markets. And reading that article took me to several places. First of all, Roberto Bolaño, 2666, Only in Chaos Are We Conceivable. An article I wrote about Ebola in 2014 when I said it's all about its escape velocity. Viruses exhibit non-linear and exponential characteristics. I was talking about the high-tech millennial crypto avocado economy exhibiting viral, wildfire, and exponential and non-linear characteristics, not unlike Ebola. And then talking about that economy, I was saying the zeitgeist of a time is its defining spirit or its mood, and capturing the zeitgeist of the now is not an easy thing because we're living in a dizzyingly fluid moment. I spoke of the feedback loop phenomenon, which is something he's speaking about, and then I wrote an article a decade after Lehman, which he's also touching on. Home Thoughts, my recent article, was The End Is Nigh. And Greta, of course, was referencing the feedback loop and the risks of dieback, where we enter a phase of cascading system collapse. To wit, this is a photograph of an emaciated grizzly bear in Canada, which is sparking greater concern over depleted salmon population. To that note, on January the 5th, 2011, an enormous fire raged in a chemical factory in the Netherlands. The photographer Valerie Cupis took this spectacular photo of white seagulls reflecting the firelight against the black smoke. Roberto Bolaño, the sky at sunset looked like a carnivorous flower. From there I went to William Golding's The Spire. At the moment of vision, the eyes see nothing. The Spire is a 1964 novel by the English author William Golding, a dark and powerful portrait of one man's will. It deals with the construction of the 404-foot spire, loosely based on Salisbury Cathedral, the vision of the fictional Dean Jocelyn. And finally, my article about Netflix, streaming dreams, non-linearity, the reasons I was bullish about oil, but it's been a tough hold for this week, I must say, but I think we've bottomed out finally. And in that article I was quoting another article I'd read. People went from broad to narrow, he said. We think they will continue to go that way, spend more and more time in the niches, because now the distribution landscape allows far more narrowness. I'd also spoken about the 21st century real-time not only unfolds itself at the speed of light, but is full of mind-bending twists and turns. And then we learned Epstein had a collection of eyeballs on his wall. And I was also saying that the point is that the smartphone is ubiquitous even in the furthest corners of the world, and we're all peering at a newsreel. FX Pip Titan, whose charts I like a great deal, has been waxing philosophical of late, and he said all those people who drank the Kool-Aid claiming greater freedom, they're lying to themselves. And he's referencing the data-enhanced governance, a digital totalitarian state. From there, I jumped to The Lotus Eaters by Lord Alfred Tennyson. And it's a long poem, so I'm not going to read it all. Courage, he said, and pointed toward the land. This mounting wave will roll us shoreward soon. In the afternoon they came unto a land in which it seemed always afternoon. All round the coast the languid air did swoon, breathing like one that hath a weary dream. Full-faced above the valleys stood the moon, and like a downward smoke the slender stream along the cliff to fall and pause and fall did seem. And then I'll jump towards the end, but it's a terrific poem. If you've got time, do read it. The lotus blooms below the barren peak. The lotus blows by every winding creek. All day the wind breathes low with mellower tone through every hollow cave and alley lone. Round and round the spicy downs, the yellow lotus dust is blown. We have had enough of action and of motion. We roll to starboard, roll to larboard, when the surge was seething free, where the wallowing monster spouted his foam fountains in the sea. Let us swear an oath and keep it with an equal mind, in the hollow lotus land to live and lie reclined on the hills like gods together, careless of mankind, for they lie beside their nectar, and the bolts are hurled far below them in the valleys, and the clouds are lightly curled round their golden houses, girdled with the gleaming world, where they smile in secret, looking over wasted lands, blight and famine, plague and earthquake, roaring deeps and fiery sands, clanging fights and flaming towns, and sinking ships and praying hands. But they smile, they find a music scented in a doleful song, steaming up a lamentation and an ancient tale of wrong, like a tale of little meaning, though the words are strong, like a tale of little meaning, chanted from an ill-used race of men that cleave the soil, sow the seed and reap the harvest with enduring toil. storing yearly little dews of wheat and wine and oil, till they perish and they suffer. Some 'tis whispered down in hell, suffer endless anguish. Others in Elysian valleys dwell, resting weary limbs at last on beds of asphodel. Surely, surely, slumber is more sweet than toil, the shore than labour in the deep mid-ocean, wind and wave and oar. O rest ye, brother mariners, we will not wander more. Rather good, I thought. Political reflections. Nuclear war between India and Pakistan could kill up to 125 million people and then tip the world into a decade of starvation as smoke blocks the sunlight. If the neighbours attacked each other with a significant proportion of their growing nuclear arsenals, millions would die instantly from the blast, and then firestorms would rage through cities. The fires would send huge quantities of smoke into the atmosphere, devastating agriculture as it blocked sunlight and cut temperatures. Researchers considered a scenario in 2025 where militants attack India's parliament, killing most of its leaders. New Delhi retaliates by sending tanks into the part of Kashmir controlled by Pakistan. Fearing it will be overrun, Islamabad hits the invading forces with its battlefield and nuclear weapons, triggering a nuclear war. Calculating different outcomes according to whether the rivals used their largest nuclear weapons, the researchers estimated 50 to 125 million people could die, and nuclear ignited fires would spread smoke across the world within weeks. Surface sunlight would fall by 20 to 35%, cooling the global surface by 2 to 5 degrees centigrade and reducing rain and snow by 15 to 30%. Recovery would take more than 10 years. Agriculture would fall by 15 to 30% on land, threatening mass starvation and additional worldwide collateral fatalities. My article over the weekend was "The End is Nigh," as you will recall, and I did reference Imran Khan's speech, which was, I felt, as effective as the reverse swing with which he used to bamboozle the world's best batsman. And this time he bowled Prime Minister Modi all ends up, in fact, highlighting exactly this situation. And that's why I also said on the 1st of April, there is certainly a fin de siècle and even apocalyptic mood afoot. Independent tribunal into forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience in China is frightening. It is believed that there are in the hundreds of thousands and possibly millions of Uyghurs in prison. 15 million people have been blood and DNA tested, and that blood testing is compatible with tissue matching. He suspected that the CCP is building their national database for organ trade, and that the number of samples collected has exceeded 17 million. This is so alarming. As I've said, the peripheries of tinderbox in many parts of the world, in Xinjiang in China, which is under a lockdown, is a laboratory experiment. I just did not expect it to be like that. Trump, he's trapped. He's playing poker, holding 2 threes and suddenly putting all of his chips in. It's pure emotion, the mark of a panicking amateur. Putin, about the 2020 US elections, of course we're going to interfere, he said. And that references what I wrote about in December 2016. We have a deviate Tomahawk, I said, and I was talking about a parabolic Putin rebound. I said his fortress Europe surrounded the intellectual father of the new zeitgeist that propelled Brexit, Le Pen, the 5-star movement in Italy, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. I said the intellectual father is Putin. In the Middle East, he was calling the shots in Aleppo. And I said, but for this article, my starting point is the election of Trump, because hindsight will surely show that Russia ran a seriously sophisticated program of interference, mostly digital. I then was quoting Don DeLillo, and I said, I've no doubt he ran a 21st century predominantly digital program of interference amplified the Trump candidacy. Trump was an ideal candidate for this kind of support, linguistic warfare specialist, crooked Hillary, lying Ted, little Marco, low energy Jeb. These names were devastating and terminal. And I said the first thing is plausible deniability, and the second thing is non-linearity. And Putin's obviously a little bit like Khamenei, not bothering with the plausible deniability anymore. And then I was saying, from feeding the hothouse conspiracy frenzy online, a constant state of destabilized perception, timely and judicious doses of WikiLeaks leaks which drained Hillary's bona fides and her turnout and motivated Trump's. What we witnessed is something remarkable and noteworthy, in that Putin has proved himself an information master, and his adversaries were his information victims, I said. Asked about 2020 interference, he joked, "We'll definitely do it." This was during a panel at Russian Energy Week. "I'll tell you a secret," he said. "Yes, we'll definitely do it," adding in a stage whisper, "Just don't tell anyone." He's now taking the proverbial. And as I said, Trump is a linguistic warfare specialist. He's now calling Adam Schiff, Shifty Schiff. And this is actually dangerous territory, because it's invoking centuries-old anti-Semitic tropes. And then in July, when he was attacking the ladies, the Democrat ladies, I said, he tweets in wrestling speak. Lightweight Marco Rubio was working hard last night. The problem is he is a choker. And once a choker, always a choker. Meltdown. His linguistics derived from the world of wrestling, and between 1988 and 2013 he ran wrestling events, appeared ringside, notably in the Battle of the Billionaires, and was even inducted into the World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Fame. Despite being presented as a competitive sport, professional wrestling is scripted. The competitors' results, pre-match and post-match interviews, all of it is make-believe. The broadcasters give their audience all the things you'd expect in a work of fiction. Backstory, suspense, symbolism, and so forth. And Stephen Gross did a great article in the Financial Times about this. In wrestling as in literature, names are never neutral. Naming a character is an essential part of creating them. There's always a face, short for babyface or hero, and a heel, a villain. Hulk Hogan and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson are faces, Jake the Snake Roberts and Rick Rude are heels. Wrestling pits good against bad, a genuine He-Man against a phony rascal. To emasculate his opponents, Trump uses this trope: low-energy Jeb, Mr. Magoo, Jeff Sessions, lying James Comey, the rat Michael Cohen, highly conflicted Bob Mueller. So that is one of his serious strengths. I watched this documentary on PBS, Frontline PBS, about the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. It was really very, very good, very interesting. But my conclusion remains, as it was on the 23rd of September, that we're at a peacock throne moment for the House of Saud, and it's all about whether the Crown Prince is able to exercise a stop loss if he wants his House of Saud to survive. He arrived on the scene, launched an unwinnable war in the Yemen, and it is clear now that the Yemen war has become Saudi Arabia's Vietnam. Another fellow who's popping over the radar is Qassem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC Quds forces, explaining how he and Haji Radwan and Saeed Nasrallah were in the street under the Israeli drone's eyes. This is in 2006. My article over the weekend quoted Bolsonaro, said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." And he spoke of trails of death and destruction, ideologically infected human souls, biologically perverted children. And I said, Unga is one of the few platforms where William Esparza's edict, smash the control images, smash the control machine, applies. Just about everybody gets their Warholian moment, Warhol said. In the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. Hong Kong protesters could face a year in jail for wearing a mask. I was watching a special report, Hong Kong on Edge. This is by Bloomberg. I went back to that comment that Joshua Wong said that Hong Kong ist das neue Berlin. I think it is. The periphery, as I said previously, is a tinderbox in many parts of the world. Xinjiang is also under lockdown. Kashmir, Gaza, Crimea, Hong Kong, Taiwan. So, those are the places to keep an eye on. Let's move to the currency markets. Let's take a look. Euro dollar 109.69, dollar index 98.857. We've seen the dollar come off a little bit. Last two sessions, Japanese yen 106.75, Swiss franc 0.9988, the pound 123.31. I must say Boris has completely inflected his linguistics to good effect. I was listening to him yesterday, the Australian dollar. Let's take a look at where that is, 0.6750. India rupee, they just cut rates, 71.0395. South Korean won, 12.0174. The Real, Brazilian Real, 408.07, Egyptian pound, 16.3039, and the South African rand, 15.15. This is a chart of the dollar index. I'm still bullish, but we've had a bit of a retracement. Euro dollar, this is a chart from FX Pip Titan. He's bullish about that, and he called it right at the bottom actually, 109.69. Sterling, again another one he called, but we're now currently 123.30. I thought that the language coming out of the Europeans was much more conciliatory and emollient, but I'm still not clear whether Boris has done enough to thread that needle. The platform economy I've written about before. The power of platforms is reflected in the fact that 7 of the world's top 8 companies by market capitalization use platform-based business models. The economic geography of the digital economy does not display a traditional north-south divide. It's all about the US and China. And UNCTAD made this important point: countries at all levels of development risk becoming mere providers of raw data to those digital platforms while having to pay for the digital intelligence produced by with that data by the platform owners. New form of colonization. Gold, where are we? 1508.50. Crude oil, $52.62. I'd like to see us above 54 by the close of business. Well, that's a tough call, admittedly. The Indian Central Bank has cut interest rates 25 basis points to 5.15%. Treasury, who I follow, is expecting a further rate cut in December. Contracting PMIs, imports slowing on all cylinders, this economy, not to mention the recent corporate tax cut of 10%. Sub-Saharan Africa on the 2nd of September, I was quoting Adesina, who said the US-China trade war and uncertainty over Brexit pose risks to Africa's economic prospects that are increasing by the day. You have Brexit, you also have the recent challenges between Pakistan and India that have flared off there, plus you have the trade war between the US and China. All these things can combine to slow global growth with implications for African countries. And then I was talking about how China has exerted the power of pull over vast swathes of the world, from Germany to Angola, from the Mekong Delta to Asia. But that power of pull is now ebbing. And I said, where does that leave Africa? I said, firstly, it places an enormous premium on nimble policy making and a heavy discount on policy making that cannot read the signs. Or as Lao Tzu put it, men are born soft and supple. Dead they are stiff and hard. Plants are born tender and pliant. Dead they are brittle and dry. Thus whoever is stiff and inflexible is a disciple of death. Whoever is soft and yielding is a disciple of life. The hard and stiff will be broken. The soft and supple will prevail. I was saying Abiy had been quite nimble, with the restructuring and reprofiling of the debt. But I also said the continent is non-linear, which it is. Mugabe is buried in a steel coffin encased in concrete as the family claims people are after his body. Bizarre burial of Mugabe saw the former Zimbabwean leader interred in a steel-lined coffin under a layer of concrete on Saturday, following a bitter dispute over his resting place between government officials, traditional leaders and family members. 22 days after he died, the body of the strongman was finally buried next to his home with his second wife, Grace Mugabe, in the village of his birth, 55 miles northwest of Harare. His eldest nephew, Leo Mugabe. People really are after his body or his body part, so he wanted something that is tamper proof. That is why the casket was changed. Mrs. Mugabe, draped in heavy black lace for more than 3 weeks, has made it clear to all who would listen that Mnangagwa and his loyalists were not welcome at the burial. He previously said on his 88th birthday, "I've died many times. That's where I've beaten Christ. Christ died once and resurrected once." I wrote about it on his death, and I was quoting Mario Vargas Llosa, who said, "Something bigger than you and me, power. You don't fool around with power, my friend," which I would argue was the common and overarching thread of his 37 years of leadership, but that most of Zimbabwe's citizens are born free and that the fight for independence was real but is no longer relevant. I said in the case of Emerson Mnangagwa, who was eulogizing Mugabe as a revolutionary icon, has failed and is frankly as untenable as his erstwhile mentor. In this video footage, President Cyril Ramaphosa welcomes the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammadu Buhari, upon his arrival at the Nelson Mandela Amphitheatre. I went back to the 18th of February, where Ramaphosa was quoting Ben Okri. "We dream of a new politics that will renew the world under their weary, suspicious gaze. There's always a new way, a better way. That's not been tried before." I don't think either of these two are going to achieve that. South African all shares up 1.88% year to date. Dollar Rand 15.15, still in that 1450 range. Egyptian pound 16.3096. EGX 30 up 9.07% year to date. Nigerian all share down 13.82% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 11.76% year to date. Acorn CEO Edward Kirathi said raising corporate bonds in Kenya is like walking through a hurricane. This is Acorn Group, main investor PE fund Helios, 85% subscription, raising $43 million out of a request for $50 million. The current bond market is very bearish and lack of confidence with what is happening with other bonds. It was very useful to have Guarant behind us because it gave investors comfort that this is a good bond. Nairobi all shares up 5.06% year to date. NSE 20 is down 13.76% year to date. And with that, I wish you a wonderful weekend. Thank you.